Welcome back to the podcast history of our world. Chapter 14, The Middle Kingdom. Egypt's last 500 years or so saw the construction of the pyramids and relative peace and prosperity under strong rulers such as Djoser, Sneferu, and Khufu. It's through their might and ambition that they successfully solidified the cultural unity of Egypt as once envisioned by Narmer. Some might say their methods were a little extreme, but ruling from their capital city of Memphis, these kings brought wealth and abundance to the land. Successive leaders struggled to emulate their accomplishments, but all sought to achieve glory here on earth so that their deeds would be forever remembered here and in the afterlife. And then there's Pepi II, the wimpy last monarch of the Old Kingdom. In all fairness, he got put on the throne at age 6, and being raised in a royal cocoon, so to speak, probably messed him up a bit. So I'll cut him some slack. And it's also not his fault that the Nile went through successive low floods causing food shortages. He probably could have managed this time better, but he can't control the weather. And yet, that's all the leeway he gets from me. The hallmark of his rule is decentralizing the government. Instead of one vizier overseeing all of Egypt, there were two, one for upper and lower. He also gave greater power to the provisional governors called nomarchs, who managed the 22 provinces of Egypt called, you guessed it, nomes. Unsurprisingly, this increased power brought increased wealth, and that sparked a desire for more wealth, and to hold on to that wealth. And what was once an appointed job for the most capable shifted over to a hereditary position, i.e., it was now a family business. And that meant power was flowing away from the king into the most influential of the nomarch families. Whether Pepi turned an inattentive blind eye to this, I don't know. He did, however, live to be 100, so even with the best in ancient Egyptian medical care, he couldn't have been particularly lucid in his later years. And while there's nothing to indicate his age caused problems with his cognitive abilities, him reaching an advanced age actually messed things up real bad. Because he sat on the throne for so long, this prevented many far superior heirs from taking over and ruling way better than he could have. And if you think I'm being callous about this, I'm not the only one who feels that way. From the Admonitions of Ipuwer, a reflection written during the later Middle Kingdom period, the sage Ipuwer writes that if Pepi was a better shepherd of his people and knew how greedy and evil men could be, he would have imposed obstacles, he would have stretched out his arm against them, he would have destroyed their seed and their inheritance. But where is he today? Is he sleeping? Behold, his might is not seen. When Pepi does finally kick the bucket as a centenarian, his elderly son, Nemteemsaf II, rules for only a single year before he too croaks, possibly muttering some choice words about his father. With his death, there is a mad scramble for anyone with a drop of royal blood to fill the throne. Manetho, a later Egyptian historian, records that during this time there were 70 kings in 70 days. But that's him channeling his inner Herodotus. We're looking at a more realistic 17 kings in 20 years. Their names are meaningless to us, but I will mention that only a King Ibi lived long enough to build a pyramid for himself, hastily assembled, and today nothing more than rubble. All in all, not a good time. The records describe chaos, famine, insecurity, turmoil, really bad stuff. But not anarchy. The first intermediate period, which is what this time is called, has its fair share of calamity, but one thing the Egyptians never run out of was government. Might not be the government you want, but still, it's there. Initially, as Memphis and the king lost more power to the nomarchs, Egypt became an oligarchy, ruled by the few elite nobles. Or maybe even a plutocracy, ruled by the wealthy, because after all, the two tend to go hand in hand. Oh, and just to show you how pitiful the monarchy had become, a king named Neferkahor issued several executive decrees in the course of a day, honoring the ruling family of a city named Gebtu and lavishing them with royal favors. Okay, nothing too out of the ordinary for a king, but a little investigative journalism reveals that the nomarch of Gebtu was the son of the royal vizier of Upper Egypt, who was married to the eldest and favored daughter of the king. This is political nepotism of the worst kind. The person who's supposed to be in charge is sucking up to the wealthiest private families. That doesn't make any sense. And while all this was happening, a different kind of nomarch had risen to power in the delta city of Hewet-Nennesu, later known as Heracleopolis. The city of Heracles? Well, the Greeks identified the local Egyptian god Harsaphes with their own Heracles, and since those Hellenes end up taking over Egypt further out in our story, we get Heracleopolis. Well, the nomarch of this city was named Keti, and he had a reputation for being just nasty and cruel. This seemed to have worked well for him, though, as for whatever reason, Keti extended his political influence to other cities before marching an army into Memphis, expelling the current dynastic line and becoming king himself. And then going mad and getting eaten by a crocodile. Well, I guess he's following in the proud tradition of Egyptian kings getting eaten by animals. Well, nevertheless, in a shocking coup d'etat, a nomarch was now king of Egypt. Not bad for him, but there was still famine in the land, and plague as well. Another nomarch of Hierakonpolis named Ankhtifi writes, "I gave food to the hungry and clothing to the naked. I gave sandals to the barefooted and took care of the towns of Hephat and Hormer during every crisis. The whole of Upper Egypt died of hunger and people ate their own children. But I refused to see anyone die of hunger and gave grain to the north. And I do not think that anything like this has been done by the other nomarchs." Big-hearted philanthropist or shrewd and cunning politician, the grain he sent was not a handout, it was a loan. And under the pretense of rescuing citizens from a bad governor, he annexed the town of Jeba, all while loudly proclaiming his loyalty to the Heracleopolitan kings. He also secretly allied with Abu, a fort city on the first cataract of the Nile, and yep, he's sounding a lot less like a selfless hero and more like another ambitious glory hound. But almost right on cue, out comes another nomarch, this time named Intef, from the city of Ta-Opet, aka Thebes. Intef has declared to all the nomarchs and the king that he is to be addressed as the great overlord of Upper Egypt, which seems laughable until you find out he has prepared a sizable army to back his words. The nearby city of Unit decides it would be better to pledge their loyalty to him, while even the city of Gebtu, that one with the shady nepotism, agrees to a military alliance. To commemorate all this good fortune, Intef decided that Great Overlord wasn't gonna cut it, and chooses a new title for himself, Son of Re. In other words, King. And with a king already on the throne, Egypt descended into civil war. The fighting would last nearly a century, from 2080 to 1976 BC. Considering that the American Civil War lasted 4 years, that's an awful lot of time. Intef struck out at nearby towns in a show of force, but Thebes quickly found itself besieged by the army of Ankhtifi, who was no doubt annoyed that his own plans of kingship had been delayed. The Thebans took defensive positions while Ankhtifi gloated. He writes, "My courageous crack troops, yes, my bold crack troops ventured to the west and east of the city looking for an open battle. But no one dared to come out from Thebes because they were afraid of my troops." Oh, hubris. It's probably my favorite theme in history. Intef held tight in his city and won the battle. Ankhtifi doesn't pursue any further and lives out the rest of his life finishing his autobiography. And after Intef inevitably dies, he's succeeded by either his brother or his son, also named Intef, who continued subduing cities by force or intimidation. Abydos, Abu, even their former ally Gebtu fall in. There's even time for a military raid over the Nubian border before the second Intef's time on Earth is up. Which doesn't mess up his plans because his successor, also named Intef, makes sure Thebes becomes totally dominant over Upper Egypt. The third Intef's military victories kept the peace, even while many cities suffered from famine. His dad, Intef II, seemed to take genuine action providing food aid, and it's safe to assume he did as well. But he only ruled for 8 years, and while Upper Egypt was secure, there's much more to do. A new leader was needed, and hopefully, they'd knock it off with this Intef naming craze. Enter the man of the hour, Mentuhotep II. Named after the Theban war god Montu, he proclaims himself king around 2010 BC and takes the Horus name Sankh-Ibtawi, the one who brings life to the heart of the two lands. Although he has a strange way of expressing it. As if possessed by his war god, Mentuhotep went straight for the jugular, plowing through enemy cities before the armies of Thebes arrived at the gates of Heracleopolis. The siege is quick and bloody. The decades of fighting had taken their toll on the land and its people, and the Theban soldiers unleashed hell on the former capital, burning it to the ground and desecrating its royal tombs. Nasty business, but intended to send a crystal clear message. The enemies of Thebes will suffer not only here, but in the afterlife. Mentuhotep had won the war. Egypt was reunified, and Thebes was the new seat of power. Obviously, it's not quite so simple. There's still rebel cities, loyalist fugitives, and stuff like that, but mostly it's over. Now comes the rebuilding, and the propaganda. Temples are constructed, irrigation canals fixed, and of course you gotta build monuments. Images of Mentuhotep pop up all over the land to reinforce just who the new boss is really. He's also responsible for finally correcting the mistakes of Pepi II's administration. A 200-year-old mistake. He replaced many nomarchs with his own loyal followers, and while keeping the two viziers to manage Upper and Lower Egypt, he made them more directly accountable to him. If you're going to call yourself the son of the sun god, everything needs to revolve around you. Egypt was on a path towards a bigger, stronger, and fully centralized government. This change in policy is also the hallmark of a new era for Egyptian history, the Middle Kingdom. From around 2010 to 1630 BC, the monarchy would bring strict order to the land. No more petty lords, no more would-be strongmen, no more claimants to the throne. Things are so stable that the 12th dynasty, which starts after the relatively quiet reigns of Mentuhotep III and the IV, will last for 180 years and feature 8 kings from the same family line. Well, and then comes the snag. See, Mentuhotep IV had a vizier who may or may not have had a suspicious role in his possible assassination. Nothing proven, it could just be coincidence, but if there's one thing that Disney movies have taught me, it's that the vizier is always behind it. This guy, Amenemhat I, didn't have a single drop of royal blood in him, but following the untimely death of Mentuhotep IV, he somehow quickly takes the throne. Now, I don't want to start any unsubstantiated rumors about this guy, but since he kept records of how he had to deal with a ton of rebellions during the first part of his reign, we can assume something wasn't kosher here. Well, regardless, he does a pretty decent job of crushing all dissent and goes to work building his brand. Consolidate political power? Check. Consolidate religious authority? Check. Once we build this giant temple to the Theban god Amun. And lastly, what king wouldn't be complete without a pyramid? And here's where Amenemhat is so fiendishly brilliant. How can he bridge a connection with his simple blood to the great kings of old? Amenemhat uses bricks from the Great Pyramid of Khufu for the core of his own pyramid. Well played. Secure at home, Amenemhat looks to foreign affairs and takes part in what was becoming an obsessive pastime of the Egyptian kings: war with Nubia. This time around, it wasn't going to be some raiding party. Nubia had grown stronger while Egypt fought, and since people were still hiring Nubian mercenaries, they were still learning all about Egyptian methods and customs. Interestingly, the Nubian kings of Wawat, on the border of the first Nile Cataract, even started taking Egyptian names, like Wajikara and even Intef. Flattery will get you nowhere with Amenemhat, unfortunately, and he sent his army now into the second cataract, crushing the Nubians. One of his subordinates had this chilling message recorded. I killed the Nubians of the entire remainder of Wawat. I sailed upstream in victory, killing the Nubian upon his land, and I sailed downstream. I put their houses to the torch, as is done to a rebel against his king. This brutal policy towards the Nubians meant that Wawat was firmly under Egyptian control, its people and resources to be used at the whims of the state. Except Amenemhat wouldn't live to see the results, because he too is assassinated by an unknown hand. The motives behind the act remain a mystery. Was it in revenge for the death of Mentuhotep IV? Was it because his common blood was seen as an insult to the throne? Or maybe it was because whoever orchestrated it thought they could marginalize the young son and heir of Amenemhat, the Prince Senusret, in the mid-1900s BC. Now, they messed up bad, and when Senusret learned of this conspiracy, he quickly took the throne and used a new kind of weapon against these assassins: the written word. He commissioned a text, the Teachings of Amenemhat, which reads as if his father was giving life advice to his son. The text ends with his father recounting that terrible night when those cowards came in and struck him down. And it worked. Call it embellishment, call it revisionist history, whatever. Amenemhat was now a sympathetic figure. Amenemhat was now a martyr. So Senusret I took the throne and brought the land into a new age of prosperity. Government was expanded further with loyal administrators, governors, and military officers. Trade increased into the Levant, Syria, Mesopotamia, and Crete. He also took Nubian aggressive policy further, pushing the military down to the Third Cataract now. His successors, Amenemhat II and Senusret II, also continued in this success, but not much else is known about them from the historical record. Then in 1836, Senusret III really brings new heights to the power of the kingship. We're talking total, supreme, unquestionable power. All those nomarchs out there were loyal to him, true, but they were so far away. Who knows what schemes they could be hatching? And so Senusret III followed the keep your friends close and your enemies closer mentality. Influential nomarchs were given cushy jobs at the royal court, a significant honor with tons of perks, housing in the posh areas of Thebes, higher salaries, and even plots of land in the best cemeteries. It was such a sweet deal that nobody seemed to notice that Senusret had effectively gutted the nomarch position. Who cares about being so far away from your own power base when you're living the high life? Yes, all government officials were now Senusret's pawn pieces, but who cares when life is easy? Everyone was happy, and Senusret did what Egyptian kings do when they're feeling good. He went on a sightseeing tour of Nubia. No, just kidding. He went to war. Again. The border at the Second Cataract was now firmly established with forts and a form of immigration control. All Nubians wishing to cross into Egypt could be inspected and shaken down for goods and money. He also established a sort of informal policy that encouraged Egyptian garrisons to go after Nubians whenever they wished. In a message from Senusret, either encouraging his men or warning the Nubians, he boasts, "I am a king who attacks to conquer. Valorous it is to conquer, cowardly to retreat. The Nubians are not to be respected. They are wretches, craven-hearted. I have seen it, and it is true. I have captured their women and carried off their children, burst forth to poison their wells, killed their cattle, cut down their barley, and set fire to it. He who maintains the border, he is my son. But he who fails to fight for it, he is not my son. He was not born to me." Senusret III reigned until about 1818, and his military exploits may have been the inspiration for a legendary king named Sesostris, who supposedly led his armies out of Egypt, conquering as far north as southern Russia. Now then again, even Herodotus doubted this story, and if he doesn't believe it, you can be sure it's not true. Still, it seemed like all that Nubian-focused testosterone fizzled out with his death. His son and grandson preferred to focus on building temples and pyramids, and, shockingly, cultivating positive foreign relations. Are we looking at a new page of Egyptian history? Well, no, because something unthinkable befell the kingship. They ran out of male heirs. Okay, nobody panic. Maybe we can try something new? In 1760 BC, Sobek-Neferu becomes Egypt's first female king. There isn't a word yet for queen as a sole ruler just yet. I'm sure she's got an interesting story, but not much is known about her other than she doesn't last long, and after 4 years dies at an early age. Her death marks the end of the Middle Kingdom and the start of the Second Intermediate Period. Yes, it's another time of weak kings dealing not with rogue nomarchs, but arrogant military commanders, breakaway states, and the twin evils of famine and plague. But there is something far worse just looming over the horizon. As we'll see next time, refugees from the Levant have come pouring into Lower Egypt, bringing with them terrifying stories of savage warriors. They may appear as men from the waist up, but below is the body of a four-legged beast. Death and destruction follow wherever they go, as these fiends move with demonic speed, obliterating entire cities without rhyme or reason, slaughtering women and children alike, and they're headed straight for Egypt. Pray that the goddess Bast protects her children from the wrath of the Hyksos on the podcast History of Our World.